And now it's time to talk about how Syracuse basketball could really use a big man in its class of 2025. And this stems from Matthew Gilhool because he is 6'10", and you can consider him a power forward or a center for that matter. And it would be very nice if Syracuse can land a commitment from Matthew Gilhool. I wouldn't say it's the most important one, right? They got Sadiq White, who's a better player, or at least a better prospect. Kiyan Anthony, you could argue, is the most important, and he is a consensus 4-star and could even rise to a 5-star. But Matthew Gilhool or any big man would be very, very nice to get. The two big man targets for Syracuse basketball in its 2025 recruiting class are Matthew Gilhool and 5-star center Chris Cenac. And by the way, as I mentioned earlier, Syracuse was in Turkey to watch Jordan Smith. They were also in Turkey to watch Chris Cenac, who was on that U17 USA basketball team. So again, they killed two birds with one stone with demonstrated interest right there. It's always nice when you don't have to just fly out to Turkey to see one player. You can see multiple players that you are targeting. This is why they need a big man in their 2025 recruiting class. Next year, Syracuse does not project to have a big man on its roster. Eddie Lampkin is in the last year of his eligibility. Same with Naheem McLeod. So they're not going to have any incumbent experienced big men on their roster. And I know you guys might be saying, well, what about Donnie Freeman? Donnie Freeman might be on the roster next season, but in all likelihood, this is a good thing, by the way, that I'm going to say this. He's probably going to be a one-and-done player. That's how good Donnie Freeman is or projects to be. 9 of the past 10 number 6 overall recruits in the country have been one and done. And Donnie Freeman is number 6 in the country heading into this year. So it is likely that he's going to play 1 year at Syracuse and then he's going to the NBA. And by the way, I think we'd all take that, because that means he was really, really, really good. And Syracuse, if Donnie Freeman has a really big year, then Syracuse could have a really solid season. They could easily get their way back into the NCAA tournament if Donnie Freeman could live up to expectations in his freshman season. Easily, they can get there. So they're probably not going to have Eddie Lampkin. Or they're not going to have Eddie Lampkin. They're not going to have Naheem McLeod. That's definite. And they are likely not going to have Donnie Freeman, which leaves no big man on the roster in 2025. Now, they do have 5-star commit Sadiq White. That's great. And I'm not saying I don't want him, but he is 6'8", and he is a small forward or a power forward. Obviously, that's not a big man size. Not saying I don't like him as a prospect. He might be the best defender in the 2025 class, but he's not a big man. So that's it, really, with 2025. And the reason why I think it's important that Syracuse can get one of Matthew Gilhool or Chris Cenac, it'd be great if they can get both, but it would likely only be one, is because bigs tend to command the most NIL money. That's just how it's charted out. There's a ton of research on it online, but basically transfers tend to get more NIL money than incoming freshmen because transfers are typically more proven players. And of those transfers, big men typically earn more than a guard or a forward. That means that Syracuse next offseason, because they're not going to have Eddie Lampkin and they're not going to have Naheem McLeod and probably not Donnie Freeman, are going to probably have to go big men portal hunting again. I would prefer that they can get one of those guys. What I'm trying to say is I would prefer if Syracuse could just land a Chris Cenac or Matthew Gilhool and plug them in as your starting 5 for next season, because bigs tend to command the most NIL money, and Syracuse might not have the NIL budget to be able to get an elite big man for next season. Even if they get a big recruiting class, they still might not have that type of money to get an elite big man in the portal. Like Omar Ballo probably got north of $1 million in NIL money. There was that guy who transferred to Washington, who's a big man, who reportedly got $2 million in NIL money this offseason. Syracuse doesn't have that caliber NIL budget for one singular player. And because bigs tend to earn the most NIL money in the transfer portal, it would be nice that if next year Syracuse is looking to get an elite player in the portal, not just a bunch of 4 stars, but like really that elite player, like a JJ Starling from a couple years ago, I would hope that it's a guard because it's less money that you're probably going to have to spend. So a Matthew Gilhool or a Chris Cenac commitment would be great because you can probably just plug one of those two in to be your starting 5. Then you would have Sadiq White, in all likelihood, as your starting 4 or 3. And now Syracuse wouldn't need to go after a big man in the transfer portal, or at least an elite big man in the transfer portal. They could focus their attention on maybe getting guards or forwards who won't cost as much. You don't want Syracuse to have to spend all of their NIL budget on one player. You'd rather be able to spread it out. But if Syracuse needs a big man, that's maybe a problem. So overall, I would like for Syracuse to land a big man in its 2025 class. Matthew Gilhool or Chris Cenac would be very, very nice. Chris Cenac is the better prospect, but I would say the Orange probably have a better chance at Gilhool. They've been recruiting him hard. He's taken 3 visits. I said 1 official, 2 unofficial. Chris Cenac might officially visit Syracuse, but the Orange kind of got in late on his recruitment. So while they are pushing hard right now, they have been pushing for Gilhool for a long, long time. Having said everything, I am very optimistic about Syracuse's 2025 recruiting class. Getting Sadiq White at this stage is huge. Now it's important that they can hold on to him. They're likely the favorites to land Kiyan Anthony. Hopefully you can land a big man and then maybe London Jemison. So you're looking at potentially 3 to 4 players at minimum in the class of 2025. And that would probably give Syracuse a top 5 class in the country, to be completely honest with you all. So I am very optimistic.